Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. I'm your host, Asher, and our guest today is Jen Fontanilla.
You said it
I did. Oh my God.
right.
Yeah, so we have the amazing Jen here today. We're gonna get to talk about our theme of the day. And you're here because we get to talk about failure. And failure is a topic that we all can connect with because it's such a necessary ingredient in our life. And today I'm curious about your journey too, Jen. So we're gonna share that with the audience today about your journey around failure. So if you don't mind sharing with us where you're hailing from, what you specialize in, or you adding value to the world, and who you being a hero to.
Yes. So I'm from here in Southern California, Los Angeles and Orange County. And I am a certified money coach, author, speaker, and graphic designer. And
Mm,
so I use both left and right side of my brain, creativity with the analytical and logical. And what I love focusing on is helping people in the entrepreneurial space that are also creatives and helping them understand their money stories and their money blocks in order to build wealth, happiness, and joy.
mm. And I know you're being a hero to somebody out there in the world. So if you got to pinpoint those people you're being a hero to, who are those people right now?
There's a couple groups that I can pinpoint in my mind. Definitely, I would say the younger generation, high
Mm,
schoolers. I used to do a financial literacy workshop called the Leadership Academy, where we're teaching them financial management skills, personal money management skills, and really empowering them. Because how many times I can't tell you, I ran into adults when I was a financial advisor, and they would always say things like, man, if I had learned this a long time ago, I would be in a totally different place. And I'm like, yes. So it's giving back to the younger generation so that they can be equipped and not make the same mistakes, hopefully, that we did, right? So it's giving back to them. And that even just, people in my own age group, encouraging people that are in my age group as well as older that it's okay. We talk about the theme of failure, right? It's
mhm.
also that we all mess up. We all have made stupid financial decisions. We have bought stupid things. We've messed up. We've done it all. But it's also encouraging those people that, we can recover from this. Things are fixable over time. And so to encourage and to inspire that if you take the time now to just stop and pause and identify, well, how can we move in a better way? How do we continue to move forward? Looking at the past and learning from it, but being wiser about the decisions that we are now making moving forward.
Mm. You just something that triggered a conversation I had today, and I'm trying to poke it in here a little bit. But we
Yes.
was talking about just the American society itself and around how because you mentioned this like buying stuff we don't need, and I was talking to her about the idea of, sometimes people said my things makes me better than you. The things I have makes me better than you, but then also the other side of it is the things that I don't have make me better than you. So then if we get, or if we gotta play with both of those aspects of life when you're talking to the young kids, because they're gonna think about getting things, buying things that they don't really need, but they're gonna get because other people have it, and they might think it's gonna make them better than other people. How do you tackle that piece with the young minds?
Wow. Yeah, I think it starts off with the basic concept of understanding needs versus
Mm,
wants.
mm,
I don't think there's anything wrong with wants. I think oftentimes, especially in the money space, when it comes to personal finance, there's a lot of talk and you hear a lot of gurus and the talking heads, and you hear people say things like, you shouldn't buy that. It's just that's not a need. And I don't agree with that. I'm going to stop and say, I don't agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with buying something you want. I
mhm,
really think there's a space for that where if you have the means to buy it, you're not going into debt. It's not going to put a detrimental strain on your finances or your budget and you can't feed your family. Go ahead and buy that thing, whatever it is. Go take that vacation, go buy that purse, go buy that tool set you want at Home Depot. Whatever it is.
mm,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think people need to hear that because so often we're hearing not to buy things that we want and it only has to be a need. And if we were living like that, my goodness, that's kind of miserable,
mm,
right? But I think it's important to also acknowledge the difference. You need to know what needs are as a young person and really truly understand what needs are and being responsible, but also understanding like, hey, you know what? If I have the means to, if I have the money, yeah, I want that new jacket. Yeah, I want a new pair of shoes. Like, I'm gonna go buy those Nikes. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as you are not neglecting the responsibilities, that's where it goes wrong. when people get caught up in, well, why not, YOLO, why can't I have it? And I'm like, yeah, but all this other stuff isn't getting paid. You're behind on rent or your mortgage, when it starts going into that territory, that's when we need to be like, yeah, you can't be wanting that want right now.
Mm. You know, when I think about wants and needs, I can't. That's how I separate them for me. So needs often followed by because. Like I need this because of this, but a want doesn't require any justification at all. I want it because I want it.
And I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, and I think so. When you think about like I just want it because I want it, I don't have to justify to you why I want it. I want it.
Right.
But then the needs piece is like I need it because it's gonna do this, it's gonna do that, it's gonna do that, and
Because I don't
sometimes
want to be homeless, because I
it.
don't want to starve, because I want the lights to stay on.
Yeah, no, that's critical. So if we gotta tap into your journey, Jen,
Sure.
your personal um step towards where you are right now, what was some of your biggest failure you want to share that you learned the most from?
One of the big, I'm laughing because I'm laughing at myself. One of the biggest failures is when I quit my last job in 2005
Mm,
too early. I think, yeah, it was way too early. I was miserable. So anybody out there that is in a job that they can't stand, you can't stand your micromanaging manager boss. You don't like the work, the company doesn't care, you've asked for days off for something really important, they wouldn't give it to you. I've been there. And so I was in a place where that was my experience and that was the culture. And I got to a point where I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I was even looking at other jobs and I got to the point where I said I was even willing to take a 50% pay cut. I was a
mm,
senior graphic designer and I was getting paid really well for being only in my early 20s. But by then I had a mortgage, I had, all these responsibilities. And I was just thinking, I'm so miserable. And when you get to that point, you start to, well, for me, I had all these crazy ideas. I was like, well, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It's going to be great because I'm going to have this all figured out. And so I jumped ship. And I did have a stash that to live off of
mm-hmm,
it, and thank goodness it did the job for a while. But there was a moment when I realized, like, ooh, I should have prepared a little differently. And
mm-hmm,
so I experienced, when I say jumping ship, I left too soon. I should have set up some things to create more of a nest egg, not a nest egg, but more of like a stash so that it would be a little bit more comfortable. But like we all know, the entrepreneurial journey is can be rough and bumpy, especially when you're starting and you haven't built up that residual income or even just steady income at that. And when you start looking at that stash, you're looking
It's
at like,
going down.
that stash is depleting like nothing. And you're thinking like, oh my gosh. And you start calculating in your brain, like, okay, I got about 2 months left. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I remember that moment where I thought to myself, like, yeah, I don't know if I did the right thing. But, at that point, you just have to also start to think, okay, well, we're here now. What are we going to do? And that's when, I was a financial, I went into financial services. So that was what my transition was. I went from being a graphic designer into financial services, and this is 19 years ago. So I became an insurance agent. I was a financial advisor. But when you're green and you're starting, like, you don't have an established book of business. So, and then everybody knew me as a designer. So imagine, like, maybe we've been friends and I come up to you like, hey, can I do your financial planning? And you're just like, yeah, no. That I don't have that experience. So that was also very, very tough because even though, and I think you mentioned that you did some dabbling in the financial services world, like you are told to talk to your warm market. But if your warm market knows you as one persona, they're not going to
Mhm.
trust you immediately. It's not like I'm selling you makeup. I'm asking you to show me your financials. I'm showing you and trying to ask you to trust me with your statements and everything. And so that was a rough road because in the beginning, it was building that trust. It was building the trust to, hey, can you entrust your financial future into this graphic designer's hands?
Mhm.
So it was just a bumpy road in the beginning. So just looking back and seeing that failure of not preparing properly before jumping ship, and then panicking and asking, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And then also facing the reality that, this isn't happening as fast as I had anticipated in my mind. I thought like once I left, it was going to be like, doors open,
Mhm.
business is open, let's get going, money's going to start cranking in. Yeah, no, it didn't even happen that way.
Mm. So that job, I'm thinking it's probably like commission based or something like that. You gotta
Oh,
find the clientele and all that stuff. And
absolutely. So not only is it commission based, it's not the same number. It's not the same number coming in. So one month might be, wow, I made $1,200. And then maybe another month is like, ooh, we brought in $430. Right. So
Mhm.
it's building up and at the same time getting used to that inconsistency. And that's where I was looking at that planning that or lack thereof, the lack of planning going. I should have built a better stash to get to this point, or at least a bigger stash to get me through this period of growth. But I mean, I laugh at it now. Obviously, I'm laughing about it now, but those were moments where you learn from those scary times, you learn from those failures, and you're like, oh, yeah, I should have done it differently. And those are the kinds of stories and the lessons you pass on to friends, to clients, to people
Mhm.
that you mentor, and just like, trust me, don't do what I did. Don't do as I say, not as I did.
Mhm.
Because you want to empower other people to learn from your mistakes, because if anything, if I make a mistake and I'm learning from it, I definitely want to pass on that knowledge to spare other people the grief and hurt and pain that I went through.
Mhm. Sometimes I think people need that. Sometimes I said, don't rob me of that failure, because in that failure might be a key that I need to find to something else. So sometimes, we kind of like tell people not to do it because maybe we couldn't handle it as well as we should. But then in that same space, they might do differently with that failure than we did. So
Right.
I think about that sometimes. Like, okay, well, I want to see you go through it the same way and see what he makes of you, what he makes of you. But I'm
Yes.
assuming it made something awesome of you. So the woman that came from that experience, what is that woman today?
Oh, she's happy.
Mm,
She looks at life differently. It's shifting that mindset of versus, I actually was doing a show earlier and it was someone along those lines about how do you find the joy and embrace entrepreneurship, right? And it's taking those moments of failure or those scary moments where when you're in the muck and mire and you're just in it, it's like the worst, right? You just like, oh my gosh, it sucks. Why is this happening to me? When's this going to end? I just want to breathe. I want to get a break, all those things. But one of the things that has helped me now today is that if I stumble upon those moments, it's
mm,
it's better now because I have a different perspective on how I handle things. I look at it like, okay, what has history and the past shown? It always shows that I got through it. Even the worst of times, I'll even add to the story that, along the years, I ended up getting divorced. I ended up filing bankruptcy. I ended up losing everything. I lost 6 houses. I had problems with the IRS because everything was in my name. My credit went to hell. My ex walked away scot-free. So I look at all that stuff that I went through and I always remind myself, I got through it. I didn't
mhm,
die, it wasn't the end of the world. Of course, going through it, it feels like it, but because like, as you mentioned, how do you handle that failure? What is the way that you're going to go through it and how did you handle it? I always look back to this in the past, because they always say success leaves clues, right?
mhm,
And I'm like, I always got through it. It sucked while you were going through it, but I always looked at the end of the tunnel where I can say to myself, but I got through it. What did I learn from it? What did it teach me? What can I use from that experience to move forward in a much wiser way? Does it mean it's going to be perfect next time around there's a big mess? No, it just means I have the ability to assess it differently with a new perspective. And so now it's like I am able to look at things and say like, okay, how do we want to look at the situation? Let's say it's a difficult situation, something cringy and sticky. And I can always have the option to choose, okay, do I want to look at this from a scarcity mindset and say, this sucks and I think it's great to have a pity party. I think it's great to have that moment, but you don't want to stay there. And
mm,
one of the key things that I ask myself immediately is, okay, How long do we want to stay here? Of course, the answer is always, I don't, not anymore. I'm done. And that allows me to just immediately shift my energy. And then I'm like done with the moping. And then I'm like, all right, what do we need to do? Let's go. And then I set the trajectory of, finding a solution like, okay, well, what can I handle now? I think sometimes when we're in these giant problems, we are trying to take on too much. We're trying to think of like, well, like, okay, well, what do I do for, in a month from now? And it's like slow down. Just take a pause and ask yourself in that very moment when you're going through all of that is, what is the one thing I could do right now? The
Mm.
one thing. Don't try to make the 90-day plan to get out of it. Just think about the one thing. And I think that's what happens. We get overwhelmed. We overwhelm ourselves. And we're not focusing on a micro level today, because if you're trying to only live in the future or you're still dwelling on the past, like you don't even know how to be present. And so we miss that opportunity to figure out, well, what is the one thing that I need to do right now? And then you do it again the next day. And before you know it, you look up, the time has passed, you're a little further along the way, and you're just like, wait a minute, this wasn't so bad. And you have to kind of allow yourself to go through that to realize like you're resilient. You're able to solve so many things that you're not giving yourself credit for. And
Mm.
so when you go through that over and over, you realize like anything that gets thrown your way, you're going to be able to get through it because of how you're shifting your perspective and mindset and handling it.
Mm. I gotta say, I'm listening, and you sound like a woman that done a lot of reflecting in your life. Done
Thank
a lot
you.
of
Oh,
reflecting.
I've done a lot, Asher, a
Yeah,
lot.
Jen, it's something that this is a phrase I often use. I said they said those who study history are masters of the future, and those who study their own history are masters of their own future. And I think every subject in life is a history subject.
Right.
Everything is history. Like you can't study the future because the future doesn't exist. So all you got to do is study the history. You got to study your history. So if you sit back and look at your own life, that's something I'm encouraging a lot of people to do right now. Is like go back and look at your history and study your own history and be an expert at your own history. And then from there, there's so much empowerment in it because now you can look at your life a lot differently. So it sounds like you're a person that does a lot of reflecting.
Thank you. And you're very right. You're very right. I think with everything that I had gone through,
Mm-hmm.
I got to a point, a couple years back, and I said, you know what? I haven't stopped and paused. And what I mean is, after the divorce, and that was 2009, I feel like I was running. Like I kept
Mm-hmm.
running to just get to the new thing, the next thing, the new idea. I'm going to go to this conference. And I look back now and I'm like, gosh, that was a lot of numbing. That was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trying to prove to myself something else instead of just stopping and pausing. So that's why I'm such an advocate of stopping and pausing and being present, because I know what it's like to run away. I know, and that's figuratively and literally. I did a lot of traveling. It was just like nonstop. I lived out of my suitcase for like a year. It was just craziness. And I was like, man, why didn't I just stop and pause to just address some of these things? And so I got to a point where I was like, you know what? Enough's enough. We need to figure out why are we me talking to myself, why are we repeating certain things over and over? Why are we attracting certain people in our life? Why is this particular incident happening? Like it's rearing its ugly head every once in a while. And I thought, yeah, there's something about me that I need to reflect on and get to
Mm-hmm.
the bottom of it. And this has a lot to do with money mindset as well. There's a lot of stories with abundance or lack thereof, and how you grew up, and the challenges and the blocks that revolve around how you look at money and the relationship that you have with it. And they're all in the way. They're all in the way, but if we don't stop to look at it, we can't do anything about it. And so reflecting and meditating and taking the time to understand yourself, it opens up so many doors to explore, like, and you have those aha moments where you just, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense why I do that. And you talked about history. There is so much history in understanding what your parents go through.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they say the things that they said to you? Why do they say the different things like, well, money doesn't grow on trees, or, well, all rich people are greedy and they only out to get for themselves? I mean, you hear all kinds of things, right? And I have to stop and pause and go like, well, why did they say that? Where did that come from? That's not even true. You might not be at an awareness level where you realize that isn't true. You might just take it as is. But there's things like that where we could benefit greatly if we stop to look at, well, why am I doing that? Why does that keep happening? But we don't. Because if you were like anything like me, you just kept running away and thinking that I can just put this band-aid and I can just keep going and going and going. And sometimes we might mistaken moving fast as progress.
Hmm.
But a lot of times it isn't. You're actually moving farther away from getting to that destination where it's truly understanding yourself and learning from all those things in the past and the history that has evolved in front of you. So yes, lots of reflection, but I think that's where the growth happens when you're willing to look at yourself and own it and hold yourself accountable to the things that you obviously you said yes to. Nobody's making you do certain things. It's like we have to take accountability for our actions and our choices. And if we do mess up, I think one of the most important things to remember is to have grace. Grace that we're human beings here on planet Earth.
Hmm.
We are not perfect and that it's okay. But do you stop and ask yourself, okay, do I want to repeat this? How do I do better? But to have forgiveness upon yourself, because too often we're speaking death upon ourselves. We're saying, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. We need to stop doing that and learn how to be kind and loving to ourselves, especially in those moments when we make mistakes and create failures.
Hmm. Interesting enough, you said something that I think we need to put another pin into it because you said sometimes the parents like, oh, money don't grow on trees, and certain stuff about finances, right? About rich people, so forth and so on. And it's something I learned, right? Like you will not go where you don't love. Like you won't go a place that you don't love. You won't get to a state that you don't love. You won't go where you hate. So if you hate rich people, you will never get rich, right? If you hate money, money will, so you gotta love the places you want to go. So I recognize that because I used to think about like I used to see rich people a certain place. I'm like, but if I get rich, I'm gonna be in that same company. So I might as well love those people because those people are not bad people. It's just certain folks out there are bad. But so you gotta love where you want to go. So start loving the things you want, and you will get there. But if you don't, you won't go there.
Right. One of the things that I talk about in my recent book, the Creative Code, is
I saw you was unfolding that. Congratulations on your book, by the
oh,
way.
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so proud of this one because there are so many concepts in this book that I practice, and I'll tell you, writing this book made me just like really hold myself accountable because
Mm,
as I was looking at the content, I was like, okay, are you doing this? Because you're asking other people to do this, So I ask myself every day, okay, am I practicing this? So it holds me to the fire as well because if I expect other people to do better for themselves, I have to expect the same of myself
mhm,
if I want to be better. And one of the things I talk about are universal laws. And so to your point, if you're constantly saying, well, rich people are this, and you're bad talking it, then you're repelling that.
mhm,
You are absolutely repelling that. And so it's something that people I think don't understand. And so it's I love that you said about, you have to love where you want to go. And I think sometimes we don't understand that the state of which we are showing up and how we are being and showing up every single day is what's going to attract into our lives. So if we're constantly exhibiting hate towards a certain thing or just in general, well, guess what's going to stay and show up in your life? Hate. So don't be surprised if all of a sudden you're being rejected or somebody's treating you a certain way. You have to stop and think like, your world is a reflection of what's happening inside. And
mm,
so it's something that we should always pay attention to. Like, how am I showing up? Am I showing up with love and compassion and understanding for other fellow human beings? Am I having the sense of compassion, understanding of what somebody else may be going through? I may not know the story, but can I at least have some compassion? And trust me, I have to practice this, especially when I'm driving in this LA traffic, because I'm like thinking to myself, I don't know what that person's going through, but God bless you. I'm just going to stay in my high vibe and just keep driving 2 miles an hour till I get there. And it's about that energy, right? It's about exuding. If you want love, you got to be love. You're gonna be hateful, guess what you're going to get. So I think it's important for us to recognize that that is what you're attracting based on your vibrational frequency at which you're exhibiting.
Powerful. Eh,
Thank you.
I'm curious. Is you grew up in LA or like wait, what's your origin?
I am Filipino, Chinese, Spanish, and Portuguese. And I did grow up here. I was born in Chicago, but
That is not possible. That is not possible, Jen. That's too many
yes, and
sperms
then
at
I'll
one
tell you
time.
why the Philippines has been colonized by like everybody. That's how there's all this stuff going on.
No,
It's
I'm just saying this.
possible.
That is too many sperm at one time. You can't. It's not possible. It's not
It's
possible.
possible.
So you say
It's possible.
you're Filipino, Chinese,
Spanish,
and
Portuguese.
Spanish, and Portuguese. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Huh. So your family been in California a long time?
Oh, all my life. All my life. I grew up, I was born in Chicago, but I moved here when I was one. So pretty much Southern California.
Southern California. No, I haven't done much traveling in California. I only been to the northern side. I went to Napa Valley. I rode my bicycle through there on like this wine tasting tour for like 150 something miles. I rode through there and I just kind of enjoyed
Oh,
the ride. But I haven't
fun.
been to like the southern part of California.
Oh my gosh, you need like a month. There's so many things to do down here. I mean, people ask me like, "Hey, if I visit, where should I go?" I'm like, "Okay, how many days do you have? How many weeks are you going to be here? Because you can't cover it all. It's just there's just so much to do." Yeah.
I see why some people love California. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we have a lot of mass exodus of people leaving. That's a whole different discussion because we have a lot, our tax rates are high, and the traffic, the homelessness, all the things that people complain about. But I love it. I love California.
No, I saw that because I was in Colorado before I moved here. And when I
What part?
retired from the military in Colorado, there's a lot of California was buying up a lot of stuff in Colorado. A lot of them was moving to Colorado. So I was like, okay, all right, I
Yeah.
see.
What part of Colorado were you in?
I was in Colorado Springs.
Got it.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
at the army base. Yeah, that's why I retired from the military at, and it was pretty good. I love the mountain life. I do a lot of snowboarding and stuff when I was out there. I love that mountain life.
Right.
Hmm.
Oh, it's so crazy. You feel the sun. Like
Oh
it's
yeah,
like it feels like it's like right there. I
it's
go to
right there.
Colorado often, so
Uh,
very familiar with Colorado.
hmm. So you do a lot of public speaking. You like that world. So what made you get into that world of public speaking?
Okay, this is gonna sound so weird. But the first time I had I mean, I noticed that when I was a kid, I always loved volunteering for reading, like when the teacher would say things like, okay, who wants to read the passage on page, 72? I would always raise my hand. I always wanted to read out loud and volunteer when we had those lessons, or I got excited about projects where you had to present it. I wasn't afraid. I mean, I would get nervous, but I just noticed that I enjoyed that. I didn't shy away from it. And then I also was a competitive dancer. So as a kid and growing up. And so I realized as an adult, I was like, you know what? There was something about the performance that I loved. The whole performing, the whole like getting on stage, that whole like, oh my gosh, this is scary. I'm nervous, but it goes away in like 3 seconds. And then it wasn't until I was asked to do my grandfather's eulogy in 1999, and I remember being at the pulpit at the church and at the podium. And I remember just that feeling of like looking out and having the microphone, and I'm like, it is so weird because I remember feeling it. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, why am I thinking this during my grandfather's
Mm,
funeral? But I remembered it so clearly, and then I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I really love how your words can have such a profound effect on people, right? Whether your words are good or your words are bad, you still have this profound effect to inspire and instill whatever it is that you're trying to say. And so from then, I kind of did it here and there, but I always loved presenting. I always found that fun and fascinating, and commanding the attention of the audience and pouring back into them, whatever the subject was. And so it wasn't until I became a financial advisor, there were a couple of conferences and I got to present. And then I realized like, okay, I was kind of just doing it here and there if I got asked. And then it was years later, into present time where, now we have podcasts and different things like that. And I just realized like, man, this is so fun. Like I really love it. And I think that stems from growing up and enjoying the whole performing process and being on stage and all the things. And just having that presence. And I still get nervous, but it's only for a few, it's only for a few seconds. And then it's like, once you're in that zone, you just realize like, I got this. We're having a conversation. It's just kind of one way for now. Just me talking. But I absolutely love it. It's fun for me. It's the one thing that I absolutely love in the entire part of my business. It's like storytelling. You're telling stories, you're inspiring, that's why I don't have a problem sharing the crappy moments that have happened, because everybody will learn from that, or at least at the minimum relate to that, right? And I never wanted it to be like, oh, I'm so perfect and nothing bad happens to me, because something I've said very, very often is no one relates to perfect. You actually have this, I think for me, the way that I assessed it was
That's
like,
profound.
you're just
Hmm.
right. So it's like I'm thinking like, why, if I saw somebody that tried to portray everything was going right and there were no problems and everything was perfect, I'm not going to be inspired. I'm going to be sitting back going like, sure. Okay, you liar, right? I'm going to be thinking all kinds of things. But if I am humble enough to just say, you know what? Yeah, I was a financial advisor and I had to file bankruptcy. I had problems with the IRS. I went through the divorce. I lost all my investment properties. People are going to be like, oh my gosh. And I just missed a credit card payment and you went through that. Like, okay, I'm inspired. Like, I can get through this thing, right? Or whatever people's problems are. It's like, it's important that we share those moments. And I've had people ask me, well, how do you know when you should? And I'm like, that's up to you. That's a very personal choice. That's something that you have to decide when you're comfortable sharing those parts of your story. Trust me, I wasn't telling that story when it was happening.
Mm.
It didn't happen until years later when I felt comfortable. So when I've been coaching people, like, people that are interested in speaking, or, you know, sharing part of their life in a presentation, they're like, well, I don't know, when do I know if it's okay to say that? And I'm like, you have to be comfortable. And I think there's also a flow where you have to also analyze, is it that you're completely afraid or not comfortable or you're not ready? Because there is going to always be that element of like, it's going to feel scary. I don't think that ever totally goes away.
Mm.
But there are going to be times where you have to challenge yourself, right? And say like, okay, this is scary, but I'm going to do it anyway. And just be like, and for me, there are many times when I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do it and I'll figure it out, because I'm now not afraid if something goes wrong, because like as we talked about earlier, if something does go wrong, I always can say to myself, all right, that didn't work. How do we fix this? How do we change the direction and how we're going? The problem is when we stay afraid and then we don't move and there's no action, there's no movement, and then you're in a stalemate. Then there's nothing happening. You can't even make a decision at that point. So I feel like you're better off making as many mistakes as you can, learning from them and learning how to pick yourself back up, and saying with the perspective of like, okay, that didn't work. How do I do better? What went wrong when I made certain moves and decisions? And okay, all right, I identified it. It was when I did this. I should have done that.
Mm.
Now you can take that piece of wisdom and make a better decision moving forward. And so it's like a game, it's like we're trying to make sure everything is in alignment and everything's perfect. Like, you're gonna end up not doing anything.
I am glad you enjoy being a public speaker. I'm
Thank you.
glad you enjoy like putting your message out there with the world, because I think when we think about failure and success, I think I know you agree with me on that. I think it's way more liberating to talk about your failure than to talk about your success.
I
Because you're right.
agree. I totally agree with that. I think there is some freedom. There's a lot of freedom, because I think it's also going to a deeper level where you are
Hmm.
showing to yourself, and not necessarily to prove to other people, but at least to yourself, that I had the power and the courage to share something so personal
Hmm.
and so deeply painful, that I had the courage to say it. I mean, that is a huge accomplishment, especially when I see other people share their stories. I'm like, wow, like you went
Hmm.
through that, especially something very personal like sexual abuse,
Hmm.
or, very, very heavy situations and circumstances that people have gone through. I admire the people who had the bravery and the courage to use their circumstances and something horrific that happened to them as a way to encourage, the audience members and to touch the hearts and minds of the people in the audience, because like that's powerful. And
Mm,
so I think you're absolutely right. There's so much freedom in being able to voice that.
mm. And I would assume you said that you didn't after the bankruptcy, that's when you felt the courage to speak about it. But it's a challenging thing when you're trying to speak about your journey while you're having it. And if you talk about your failure while you're in it. But then if you start to find a way to like take that thing out of the closet, like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing right now. Because that's when you ask for help. When you're going through something and it's very difficult, like I am failing right now because I don't see the way out. And somebody says, no, actually I can show you the way out. This is where you need to go. But if you don't know that, then you're gonna be in that failure for a long time. So if we have the courage to speak while we're in the failure process, or feel like we're failing, then you can actually enjoy the process of speaking up. You get the liberation you need. Not have to wait till you're like, okay, I succeeded now, so I can talk about it. But what have you done in your life that you was failing at it, and in the moment of why you feel like you're failing, you spoke up about it and asked for a guide. Do you have any situation that you want to share?
Yeah, recently. I mean, a couple years back, I finally got a therapist. That was one on a personal level. I hired a coach and mentor. I worked with her for several months, just kind of identifying different things that I could try from a strategic level, but also personal. So it was sometimes it's a combination of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will take a look at like who do I need to hire that would help me in this part of my life. And oftentimes I find that there's somebody who handles the personal, and then there's somebody that helps me, with the business strategic stuff. And many times, often there is an overlap where sometimes this person will go into the business stuff and this person who is helping with the business does go into the personal stuff, because it's very hard to segment our life because everything is so intertwined, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's having the humility and the courage. And I say courage because it does take that courage to say like, oof, this is going to cost an investment. Oftentimes, it's tens of thousands. And there's that level of like committing to yourself, like, yeah, this is a lot of money, but this is very important to me. This is for my growth, not only for myself, but for the people that I'm helping that are going to benefit from me being a better whole person, from learning from the things that I needed to take a deeper look at. So I say courage because oftentimes, I have conversations with other people that I'm mentoring or coaching, and they'll tell me about something they want to, invest in. They're like, I don't know, it's a lot of money. I'm like, well, yeah, but how important is this to you? What happens when you do it? And then what would it look like for you on the other side? And then they realize like, yeah, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to make this happen. I'm like, yes, figure it out because you need this. This is talking about needs and wants, right? Like you need this in order to grow from whatever it is that you're going through. And I think that's so important to recognize that it does take courage sometimes to put down a big financial investment with the right person to help you, because we can't do it by ourselves. There's a reason why we are repeating certain things or not getting to where we want to go, because we're relying solely on ourselves. And it does come to a point on your entrepreneurial journey where you do need to bring in other experts. You do need to bring in other coaches, or you need to immerse yourself in some group that can be the community that you lean on as you're trying to figure things out, because oftentimes all of you are trying to figure out something along the journey, and then you'll learn from different people in those groups because you're all at different points. There are people who are brand new, there are people who are trying to leave their jobs, and then you have the people who have been in business for multiple years making seven figures. So you're always going to learn along the way, and if it's a very supportive incubator and community, then you will learn so much faster and go farther than doing it alone.
Hmm. Well, speaking of finances, I'm curious, why is this profession that you're in, why is it so important to you right now?
It's because, one, I had the background, right? So my niche in the people that I love to serve are creative professionals and entrepreneurs. And it started with my TEDx that I did last year, where it was, artistic dreams, why you shouldn't leave them.
Mm.
And I talked about my journey. So, quick story, I wanted to be a doctor. Obviously, I didn't become one. And then I decided to go into graphic design. So I've been doing that for 25 years. And then along the way, like I said in the very beginning of our conversation, that I couldn't stand where I was working at the time. And then I decided to go into financial services. So I've been in the financial services world for 19 years. So I do both, right? I'm no longer an advisor, but one of the things that I noticed before I gave up my licenses was that I started getting curious about, like, why is it that some clients are just easy? They follow the plan. They're like on set it and forget it. They're autopilot. They listen to everything. They understand what I'm explaining and they're good. Then I had a group of other people who I'd be like, what is the problem? Like, why can't we save? Like, why do you keep messing this up? Right. And
Mm.
I couldn't figure it out. I was like, I knew it had to go deeper than discipline and not being disciplined. I knew it was more than that. And I wasn't quite sure at that time. This is several years ago. And as time went on, I realized that there was this thing called money mindset. And
Mm.
I realized that it's the stories, like I said in the beginning, it's the stories, it's what people grew up with. It's all the subconscious patterns that have been ingrained within us as kids and how it affects our financial decisions that we make today. So I did the TEDx on that, and then it evolved into the book, which just was published a couple actually 2 weeks ago. The print
Mm.
version came out, and it's just important to me because especially if you're a creative, uh, and especially if you have immigrant parents, you're constantly hearing about why you need to only go into like the traditional fields of like medicine or law, and then everything else is just a joke, right? Everything else is just a hobby. There's no other way to make money, and that really bothered me because me being a creative, but also having an understanding like, hey, I did want to be a doctor. Actually have a biology background, but I am proof that you can be very successful in a creative field. And I wanted to encourage the people that I heard so many stories from that, yeah, I wanted to be a fashion designer, but my mom really wanted me to be a nurse. I mean, I heard so many stories like that. And it's sad because when I saw these people tell me, and some of them are friends of mine, when they would say these stories to me, it would just break my heart because I thought to myself, how does that feel? To know that there was a direction that you wanted to take, but you didn't have the support. You didn't have your
Mhm.
parents backing. You kept hearing that's not a real job. Oh, that's a cute hobby. When are you going to get a real job? Or, well, that's not going to make any money. And all of those things are lies.
Mm.
And imagine being able to hear that I can choose what I want. I can make money in whatever field I choose. And because I believe that I will be successful and build wealth, regardless if it's not in a traditional path. And I just want to advocate for those people because, I've been through it myself. I'm blessed that I didn't get any, crap from my parents. My dad just kind of goes like, what are you doing? He just said that. But when I was a designer, I was very successful as a young designer, and I ended up making more money than my parents before they retired.
Mm.
So I proved it. I was like, okay, there is something to this. And so I recognize, when I look at the past, I was like, no, I have the track record. This is so not true. I got to show other people that they can do this. But if you're operating in that world of lack or believing the things that are around you, you're not going to be successful because you're listening to the lies that you grew up with. So I really, really have a heart to encourage creatives that you can make a wonderful living. You can build wealth, and you can be happy and have joy doing what it is that you truly desire and have a passion for.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing. It's interesting to know your why. It sometimes, they say why is an acronym, and why stands for what hurts you or what helped you. And if you can figure out those things that hurt you or helped you, then you get your why locked in. It sounds like you got yours.
I love that. I don't think I've ever heard that. I love that.
Hmm.
What helped you and what helped you? What hurt
What
you or
hurt?
what helped
Yeah. Either one. It could be yeah, on the other side. But I'm listening to you, and I have to ask you this question because I'm trying to get to learn about you. So for the folks that are learning about you, just hear for the first time, like who is Jen? Like deep down at the core, who is Jen? Like who are you?
you? someone, first off, I'm an Aries. I've been saying that lately because I've been following this Instagram account that talks about all these Aries memes, and it just makes me laugh because I see the little nuances we have in how competitive we are, how we love hard, work hard, and it's just about like this fire, right? You just have a fire for life, and winning and doing great things and things like that. That's kind of like I look back and I love, yeah, that's me. That's totally me. But I mean, I love to have fun. I think for me, one of the biggest things that's so important to me now is doing things that are in complete alignment with who you are,
Mm,
and saying no to the things that you don't really care to do. Now let me make something clear. I get that some of us don't want to pay bills, but does that mean I don't want to do it and I don't do it? No, no. Still be responsible. But there are things I see people like. I have like some clients that they'll be like, well, I had to do this job, and or oh, I don't know if I should take this, and they have the choice. They don't have to, but they have a choice, and they're like, well, I don't know if I should. I said, do you hear how you sound?
mm,
I'm like, that's a no. That's a no. You absolutely are not happy about even thinking about this particular proposal. And I'm like, that's a hard no. There's nothing else for us to discuss. And I think it's important for me to show that, be somebody that lives in integrity. If it's something you want to do, then do it. If it's something you don't, just graciously say no. I feel like there's so many of us who are afraid to say no. And it's not a bad thing, because
mm,
for every no, for every yes that you say yes to that you really don't want to do, you're saying no to yourself. And think about all the things that you say you want to do and how you don't have time. It's because you need to stop saying yes to certain things. And so I practice that. That's something that has become more and more important to me, to say yes to the things that I find joy in doing, that align with who I am, how I want to show up. How is this making an impact? How is this helping other people or inspiring other people? And I also just I love strategizing with people's ideas. It's fun for me to kind of have that vision for somebody else, because sometimes we can't see. I love this quote by Les Brown. He says, you can't see the picture when you're inside the frame.
mm.
And so sometimes people need that other perspective of, hey, this is what I'm doing. Am I on the right track? And I love being able to just kind of audit things for people and to see like, yeah, or sometimes they just need encouragement of, okay, I just wanted to know I'm on the right track. I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you're going to figure it out. Like, try this, try that. And you'll figure it out. But I just love working with people's creative minds and their creative ideas, and just inspiring them to like, yeah, keep going. And if it doesn't work, guess what? You will figure out what you need to do better the next time.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing it. And I could tie up to that Les Brown quote. There's something else that says the same thing as like you can't see the label while you're inside a jar. And
Right.
oftentimes that's why coaches are so important. Like you need somebody to look at you and tell you what they see, because oftentimes our gift it's obvious to other people, but it's not obvious to us. And and when somebody says, I love coming around you, Jen, because when I come around you, I get this energy. And this energy is the reason why I come around you. So now guess what? That might be a gift that they come around and get it for free. Maybe you should start charging for it. But
Right.
I appreciate you coming in and sharing your journey, Jen. And if somebody hear you right now, like, oh my God, Jen, you are my hero, and I would love to work with you. How can I reach you and work with you?
You can visit me on Instagram or Facebook or even LinkedIn, and just type in Jen Money Coach, Jen Money Coach. And then you can
Mm,
also go to my site at jenmoneycoach.com.
mm. And if you had to sum up your biggest takeaway from this conversation, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, there's so many nuggets. Um, it's something that you said earlier. Now I'm trying to remember what it was. Now the why one was the latest one, but there was something else that you said about oh my gosh, what was it?
Maybe you have to go back and listen to the episodes.
I
But
know, I need to listen to the replay. But you know what? It's one of the things I think that's a great takeaway that I'm just kind of recalling in my mind is how fun it is to talk to people like yourself. You told me earlier that this was you discovered that the podcast, and you're talking to other people and their stories, and I think that's so important to you're practicing it, right? You're discovering what it is that you want to do next, like what's the next move, and then you're diving into it. And I always love hearing that because it reminds me of that excitement in the beginning. It's that discovery period. It's like that honeymoon phase. And I think we need to remember that feeling, because during those times in your entrepreneurial journey, when things start to feel old or stagnant, or you're frustrated or you want to quit, I think it's important for us to go back to that beginning feeling of like, okay, how did I feel when I started this? What got me excited about this? And I think that when we can revisit that, we have the choice to either resurrect that feeling and figure out, well, what about this still excites me? And if there is something still there, it can inspire you to keep moving forward. Or you may discover, you know what, things have changed. I need to go in a different direction. But either way, if you can go back to that root and remember that feeling that was evoked when you started this journey, you will be able to make the decision that you need to make in the present moment.
Well, thank you for that. And I wanted to say, listening to you, I love when I meet people that love talking about their own story, that love their own story. And it sounds like you really love your story. And that's a different place to be in life when you can look back at your history and love it. Because oftentimes a lot of people depreciate their history. Like they don't increase the value of it because they don't like what happened to them. And it sounds like I'm listening to you so far. You love what happened to you because what happened to you made you into the person you are today, which is beautiful and awesome. And I appreciate you sharing your journey, just loving you, who you are, what you've been through, and making it, open to other people to love, like at least see themselves in you and love their own story as well. So that's what I take away from your conversation here.
Thank you, Asher. Yeah, like I said, wasn't loving it at the time.
Yeah, most of us don't, but reflection
Right.
help us to love our history. Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't loving it at the time. I was going through it. I was hating it. I was hating it. But that's what I want people to see, is that you get through it. You become stronger, you grow resiliency, and you if you choose to grow from it and learn from it and have a different mindset towards it. It's, yeah, do I wish it upon other people? No. Did I am I happy it happened? Not necessarily, but you know what? It's part of the journey. It's part of the
Hmm.
story that brings you to where you are today. And so I just want to encourage everyone out there that whatever it is that you're going through, failure or success, just know all of those things and parts will be a part of the story at the end. And so learn how to find joy along the way.
Here's an experiment. For example, tomorrow morning you wake up and everything that you've been through that was so challenging, you have no memory of.
Mm.
What would you do?
Did I keep any information of like skill sets?
Like,
What did I
the
wake up?
you wake up tomorrow, you roll over in your bed, you looked around, and it's like all of that, the divorce, the bankruptcy, everything that happened to you that was so heavy, like you have no memory of it. It's all gone. What would you do?
Okay.
Or how
I
would you
actually thought
feel?
about
How
this.
would you feel? How would you feel?
I think I would be overwhelmed. I'd be like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And then one of the things that I would have done is the inner work that I did in the recent years. I would have done it 15, 16 years ago.
Hmm.
And I think about that often. And it's I have a 13-year-old son who I try to instill some of these life lessons and these growth lessons that I went through and try to instill them in him now, because I don't want him learning it as an adult. I want him to start integrating it as at his young age, at his level, and even teaching him those things. So for myself, waking up in this situation, I would have immediately gone straight to working on my mindset and understanding, universal laws. I would have, had a better understanding of who I was if I had gone through this work earlier. It would have opened the door for me to handle situations and the problems at a much different level. I would have been more centered. I would have had more centered awareness and focus. And I know that when that happened, everything else had more flow to it. Everything else had more ease and flow. Even problems. Like I can see very clearly, even in the recent past, how I've been able to kind of flow through even difficult situations because I had a different perspective, because I
Hmm.
did that work. So that's the one thing I would have done differently. It wasn't another strategy. It wasn't another program per se. It wasn't another app. It
Mm.
was me stopping and reflecting, like you said, and understanding myself better at a different level. Because once that happened, everything else that I was dealing with in life had a much ease, had a bigger ease and flow to it, and it wasn't so cringy and stuck. And that's the one thing that I would change.
Hmm. Maybe I need to ask the question differently.
Sure.
So let me ask the question this way. So if somebody broke in and stole all those memories from you and you don't have them anymore, what would your life
Okay.
look like?
Oh gosh.
You've been robbed.
Of the memories,
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be here now,
Mm.
just faster. I would be
Mm.
here right now faster and maybe even 2 to 10x more
Mm.
because I'm not thinking about those things. I don't have any recollection of those things holding me back. But on the flip side, as I was answering you, I just realized there was something like wait. There was something that switched in my brain. I realized like wait a minute, it could be the other way around too. Because I didn't have those challenges, I would not have the same growth.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
So God knows where I would have been. I might even be, you know, I might be even further back because there are
Mm-hmm.
no lessons to lean on. There wasn't that situation where I was able to build up the resiliency and learn and gain wisdom from it. So I love this question because it made me think like, wait, let me change this because it's actually the absence of those things that are no longer there that now creates this void that what did I learn from then? And
Mm.
this question actually shows us the value of those memories, the value of those experiences and situations. And so we can now have a new appreciation for them happening to us. Because if they don't happen to us, how do you appreciate when you are having success? How do you appreciate when things
Mm.
are going great? You have nothing to compare it to. It's like, you can't have light without darkness. You can't have hate without love. There is nothing to compare it to. And another quote that I love is comparison creates value. So
Mm.
if there's nothing to compare it with, how can you value those good times when you don't even know what it's like to go through those very, very difficult ones?
And I assume as well, those speeches, you have to take the story out of your speeches. Your speech on it's not going, how great would your speeches be without these stuff in it?
Yeah, you would
Mm.
have no content. You won't get hired. Your talk would be so boring.
Yeah.
Nobody could relate to it because you
Yes.
would just be like, I
Mm.
woke up and
Mm.
everything was great. Yeah, and go sign up. It's like, come on, you have no content. And it's funny that you say that because this is a common problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's something that came up I was in a speaking group, and it was funny because when you're trying to write the beginning of your talk, you usually start with a story, right? And I remember some of us were feeling like, geez, man, I didn't have anything horrific happen to me. You hear about the stories, this person.
You got no hook. Where's the hook?
Right. I had a friend who got kidnapped and assaulted, and there was somebody else who, grew up in a, drug infested home, and then there was another person who, lost some body parts, all kinds of stories. And then here you are with your, nothing really happened to me. And I swear it was like you really quickly, not that you wish something bad had happened to you for the sake of having a story and content, but you realize I have nothing to write about. And then you got to stretch something that's happened to you. So yeah, you're absolutely right. What are you going to write your story on? So there's value in it. There's a purpose in it. And we may not understand why God is putting us through certain situations, but when you go through it and you get on the other side, there will be a time, I promise you, there'll be a time when you look in hindsight and go, like, now I know why this
Mm.
happened. It wasn't, and it's oftentimes it's that it wasn't necessarily for me. It was that this person that I'm talking to right now needed to hear that I went through this to encourage them to not take their life, to keep going, that there is hope, that they can change the trajectory, and that it's not over. And you realize it's not about ourselves sometimes. It's about, what is the purpose? Is it that we're living for ourselves or that we're living for ourselves or also serving other people? And many times, oftentimes, those difficult situations are there for the purpose of helping somebody else in the future.
Mm. Well said, Jen. And I will close with this piece here. So we are the story that make us up. We are the story that make us. So you gotta figure out exactly what's your makeup. Like what makeup you putting on this beautiful face that you got right here. Like what story make you up, right? And if we discover what story make us up, then we can find empowerment. Because if you listen to Jen right now, I'm telling you what I notice. We are here doing what? Making a living out of the life we have lived. So if you go back into your life, how can you make a living out of your own story? Because that's what people want to hear. Your story, how you make a living from telling your story, from sharing what you've been through, the failure, the stuff that doesn't seem like they connect, but when you look back and reflect, they do connect and empower you to kind of like own your own story. So my closing question for you, Jen, is what is that one thing or two thing when people do it drive you crazy?
How many minutes do we have? I'm just kidding. That drive me crazy?
Yes.
When somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do it.
Mm,
It's lack of integrity. That's very important to me. Not only because I'm being let down, but I think about the person that is out of integrity, and I think about how that's tearing down their character, and I don't want that for anybody. So if somebody's saying that they're going to do something, and then for whatever reason they don't do it, and then it becomes a habitual pattern, I think about how that's eroding their character. It's eroding, them living in integrity, and then that makes me sad. But also from the perspective of like, you're breaking that trust with
mm,
people around you, right? Nobody wants. I don't want to think about somebody that people don't want to work with or don't want to hang around because they don't trust your word anymore.
mm,
So it's the thing that drives me crazy is that when people say they're going to do something and they don't deliver.
mm. This is the third time you mentioned the word integrity since we've been having this conversation. I am curious, what is your top three values?
One of them's fun. One of them's so fun. I would say self mastery,
Mm,
and then prosperity.
prosperity, fun, self-mastery.
I have to have fun,
Mm,
fun and adventure. But you told me three, so
mm,
fun.
okay. And I assume
Um,
integrity is on that list big time too.
oh yeah, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. It's up there because I think we've all experienced what it's like to be let down. And
Mm,
I don't ever like being that person to do that to somebody else. Especially when, it could be as simple as like, your kid was expecting you to take them out because you said you were. What does that do when you don't do that? Right? What's the look on their face when you fail and don't keep your word? Or I've worked with different people and they told me they were going to turn in a certain project or a file by X date and it doesn't happen. And now it screws up everybody else because we were relying on this person to do what they were supposed to do. So I just don't like that disruption as much. And I get it. We live on earth. Nothing's perfect, but that kind of thing, I think we have control of. And I don't like it when there's a lot of disruption that didn't have to happen. But I get it. I'm also, I'm also compassionate. I get that some things come up, but when I find out it's a lame reason, I'm just
mm,
like, no, dude, no.
mm. You got 5 minutes?
I do. Do you?
Okay. I do. I do. So I have to ask this one then because you mentioned so letdown. It seems like that's something that you connect with on a deeper level. So how does letdown tie into your failure around life? Talk to me about the word letdown, that
Ooh,
emotion itself in your life.
question. Failure. I
Let
would
being let
say,
down, being let down.
yeah, me being let down.
Mm-hmm.
I think it adds to my experience of failure because I'm relying on somebody to deliver. I'm
Mm-hmm.
relying on somebody to take their part of whatever it was they said they were going to do. And if I'm relying on that, it has a ripple effect. So if what they were supposed to do is tied to the overall picture and it doesn't happen, now either I have to scramble or I have to go in and I have to, take care of what that person was supposed to. It causes disruption, and it's like it's creating like cracks and fissures in the whole situation, and then now there's like this yucky energy around it. Now I'm pissed off, and now I'm just like, it didn't have to be this way. If you had just said you were going to do it, then why didn't you do it? Or why didn't you give warning. I've been in situations like that too, where, the person waited for me to ask, hey, did you do it? Oh, well, no. And I'm like, why are you telling me now? Why didn't you tell me 2 days ago when we could have done something about it? So when people don't understand that their part has an effect on other people relying on them, that can create a ripple effect and cause that disruption and then cause that failure. But another way to look at it too is, you know, did I have discernment? A lot of times I will look at situations and I will ask myself, okay, well, what part did I play in this whole thing?
Mm,
It's not always everybody else's fault. Where did I go wrong? What could I have done better? And oftentimes I will also see that the failure happened at my level where I had poor discernment.
mm,
I should have seen that that person wasn't capable of it. I should have seen that they weren't exuding patterns that showed me that I could trust that they would deliver. Or I should have seen that maybe that person wasn't, you know, didn't really know what they were doing, or I couldn't really trust it yet. And I just made a hasty decision to just rely on that person was going to deliver. So oftentimes I'm always reflecting on, what was my part in it?
mm,
Whether it's business, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a friend or whatever, I'm always doing a self-reflection. I'm like, okay, we can't blame everybody else. Everybody else, yes, maybe in all fairness, they made legitimate mistakes. But I also will stop and reflect, okay, well, where was my part in this? What am I going to say and hold myself responsible for and accountable for that I created this part of it? And again, that's why I said earlier, whether it's somebody else's fault or it's your fault, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, when we do make those mistakes and it does create failure, we have to be forgiving, not only to others, but ourselves. We have to have that compassion and learn from it and then move forward because, in my book, I have a whole chapter dedicated to forgiveness
mm,
because it's so crucial for your mindset. It's crucial for your physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health, even financial. It affects so much. And so when we don't learn how to forgive, we're hurting ourselves. The forgiveness is not so much for other people. It's because sometimes in some situations that person could be dead. It could be
mm,
somebody that hurt you years ago that's long gone, passed away, and yet here you are still alive on earth and you're still mad about what happened. And it's you that's suffering, it's you that's hurting. So it's important that amidst the failure and what went wrong, that you learn to forgive yourself and say, like, okay, I forgive myself, I'm going to do better next time. I'm going to be wiser in how I do it. You keep hearing me say that, but I think we need to hear that that's going to happen. We're going to mess up. That's just the way it is in life. You might do things better, but you're going to have different situations come up. But at the end of the day, you have to practice forgiveness because it's for you, the person that got hurt, and it's healthy for you because it affects so many aspects and parts of your life, and even your health. So yep, it's not just other people, it's myself that I will ask, what was my part in all of this?
mm. Well, as you can tell, we have clocked out the time, and I appreciate the generous use of your time today, Jen. And
Thank you.
I love hearing you speak, by the way, and I'm sure the folks that are listening love hearing you speak. And you should keep speaking and telling your story because it's very empowering. And hope you come back another time on the show. We got four other things we can chat about. So
I
looking
would
forward
love
to,
to. This was
yeah.
absolutely a blast, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
And with that, I'll let that be the last word. You tune into Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. And today you got some wisdom from Jen. And I
Thank
hope
you.
you